lot of NCA money going around. There's a lot of projects. There are very few qualified black workers working. There's a lot of us out here. We don't have any jobs. And we all know when black workers don't have jobs, other problems in the community pop up.
It started with the development of the Los Angeles Black Worker Center back in 2009, when leaders from different sectors, workplace leaders, union leaders, community, faith, legal, black leaders from across different sectors came together to really look at the jobs crisis here in Los Angeles for black workers.
Actually, Lola Smallwood-Cuevas came to my office. She really made it clear that she felt like justice was being delayed and justice was being denied for black workers and for workers of other communities who were part of the coalition. I know that IDEPSCA was working with her as well, and they really wanted to have the city attorney's office create an arm where they would have enforcement powers.
Which was a 10-year fight in and of itself, in terms of getting not just the wage raised in Los Angeles, but also making sure there was enforcement of it.
We were pretty much stuck because we didn't have the authority as the city attorney's office to do this. And so, I referred her to city council and said, you should go over and talk to, some of the policymakers on the legislative side of the building and see if they can move this for you. Then in 2019, in December, I got a call from Julie Gutman-Dixon, a local attorney. She says, we have this new Civil Rights Commission and we want you to think about applying for this position. And I thought, I'll be darned. That Lola, she's the Energizer Bunny. She did it. If you know anything about Lola Smallwood-Cuevas, it's easier just to do what she asked than to try to tell her no.
We really fleshed out a model, right, to see what is a way that we could build a space for workers to support each other, to build power together, to address the issues that affect them in the workplace and their families. And overarching in our conversations, the issue of workplace discrimination came up. And we don't have time to get into this deeply rooted and complex history, but the origin story of this economy, of this country, is one in which black workers were legally disenfranchised from rights and opportunity.
It was really the coalition work, especially with the Los Angeles Black Worker Center, having really deep conversations of what does wage theft actually mean and what are sort of the varied ways that it looks like.
We began to hear from workers about the barriers to employment, about the implicit and explicit bias, about social norms that lock black workers into some of the dirtiest, most unregulated work, right? And lock us out of those good jobs and careers.
And it was kind of a really great moment where we realized, okay, we have this one fight happening, really fighting to get enforcement on the wage, but there's all these other pieces. How do we get enforcement on that as well? And how do we make it happen in the same city? Use our collective power, use our collective voice.
Hundreds of workers are marching outside several businesses in downtown LA saying they are victims of what they call wage theft.
Wage theft is any time your paycheck is less than what you've earned under the law.
People who experience wage theft, it's almost everybody in Los Angeles who works a low-wage job.
We'd love to see more support around how do we create new industries that are open to all and create more equitable workforce.
Well, I think we're very proud of what Lola said.
How this office came about was through a very dynamic coalition of worker centers and unions who were part of the Raise the Wage campaign. And within that, I think worker centers played a phenomenal and pivotal role in establishing, along with raising the wage, a serious wage theft ordinance, right, to ensure that there was enforcement.
So I joined the campaign when I moved to Los Angeles in early 2019. I was really happy to be joining the LA Black Worker Center, and I know that this is building on at that point, nearly 10 years of folks coming together to address the Black jobs crisis.
There was such a backlog with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, as well as the Department of Fair Employment and Housing. So many people weren't getting justice in those spaces for years. People were reporting 2 years on average. And Lola Smallwood-Cuevas from the Black Worker Center and, the coalition was working with her, really, wanted to push to have Los Angeles have enforcement powers as well to deal with some backlog issues.
Places like New York, Seattle, even San Diego has, an actual office and entity where resources are focused and devoted to addressing issues of workplace discrimination and the violation of civil rights. Los Angeles was actually behind the curve. Our members, really believe that as one of the most diverse cities, in the country, we felt that the city of Los Angeles should have a solution for that.
So it's a huge, huge, huge problem. And that's probably even an undercount, especially when we think about the cash economy and jobs that are paid cash out as opposed to jobs that, you can track with a paycheck and taxes taken out, et cetera.
I don't have to explain to you that the city has so many needs and so many responsibilities. And I just felt that that was going to be a concern from a budgetary, standpoint.
In order to get this department made, there was a lot of fits and starts, honestly. Because we were coming off this effort of, raising the wage and then making that wage real. But then we have to remember that right after that, President Trump was elected, right? So that also changed a lot of the narrative that was being used in cities such as Los Angeles about how is Los Angeles going to sort of show up, right, against sort of this larger increase of really discriminatory, not just languages, but actually codified processes, right? Which is why of all committees that this, policy ended up, it was in the immigration committee. Right? And it's because it was very clear that this was also a way for the city to sort of show that okay, how are we going to make this real? Well, let's make this office.
And I saw allies really proud to step up. I met Noah at UCLA and his students who, came together to help us define some of the theories and figure out how it ought to be written. I saw Professor Naro stepping up and helping advise with the organizing. Our partners at the Worker Center Network, folks from the Filipino Worker Center, Koreatown Immigrant Workers Alliance, the Garment Workers, just really coming together in a really beautiful coalition the way that folks should to stand up against discrimination.
Members have made that happen, right? I mean, I don't remember, I think it was 6 hearings, 4 marches, 75 delegations, a dozen videos, a zillion petitions. It's not easy work, right? And it takes a lot for workers to be heard.
In the community in downtown Los Angeles, a ribbon cutting ceremony for new offices of the LA Civil plus Human Rights and Equity Department. The office will help enforce the city's human rights law. That law prohibits discrimination in the private sector areas of commerce, education, employment, and housing. LA Mayor Eric Garcetti says everyone deserves to be treated with dignity and protected from discrimination.
It means everything that we have, our civil rights Commission and the Civil Rights Department, because it really says that as Angelenos, we are better than the hate and discrimination that tries to divide us.
Well, it feels like the first phase, I have to say it feels like the workers won something, right? But until it can materially change what's happening, we still have a long way to go, right? And we know the pressure will be on to not fund this, right? The pressure will be on to make other priorities.
It's a little bit surreal. It's exciting. I think tangible things like spaces are important markers, are important touchstones, especially for workers, because policy is hard to understand, It's hard to write, it's hard to read, it's hard to understand, and it's hard to make real. So if this is a space where we're gonna make it real, great, we have the space. How are we gonna fill it with investigators, right? How are we gonna fill it with a community who sees that this space is for them? So they can actually, they trust it, and they trust that the processes that are happening here are looking towards justice, and looking towards justice in a way that's understandable and feels real.
It was very much apparent to many people that had discussions following the George Floyd murder is that there's so many ways that people have their knees on our necks. And the community-based organizations were very intentional to be clear that in commerce, education, employment, and housing, these are places where discrimination has been allowed to run rampant, and there are limited resources on how to right some of those wrongs with the state and the federal government. So local government had to step up.
Where you have strong worker power, you have the opportunity to change. And so between community and workers, unions, and our political infrastructure, that's how you begin. But it starts with those stories.
I think it's so important that folks understand that this was a labor of love from Black workers and allies. And I think it's important for folks to know that this office is going to be as strong as we choose to make it. And so that means that we need to come together and understand what the office is for. We need to trust in the office and use it. We need to, encourage each other to use this like any tool. It can be used, for good or for bad. And this is an opportunity to lift up working Angelenos. This is an opportunity to make a lot of workplaces better. And I think that we need to rise to that occasion. It's time for us to do it.
I want to know that people have a place to come. People have a place where they can come and they can ask questions. It doesn't hurt to ask questions. People may not even be feeling like they're suffering from workplace violations until they start to talk about it, and then you find out, whoa, wait a minute, this is wrong. It is wrong for someone to make me feel uncomfortable, maybe staring at me or making sexual gestures or comments regarding my race or religion. And it doesn't have to be something that's just spoken. It can be subtle things as far as behavior and being mistreated and treated unfairly,
So I want the city of LA to know that the creation of this Civil and Human Rights Department was a combination, yes, of inside-outside strategy. Yes, it was the culmination of many city council meetings, many one-on-ones, marches, but it really, really was about the tenacity of workers who are not going to give up, who are not going to take no for an answer. And that tenacity is going to continue as we see the office grow, get staffed up, do the work that the people wanted this office to do.
This department came out of the demands of community. And this department came up at a time when Los Angeles took a good look at itself, thought about the covenants, thought about the state violence, thought about racial injustice and what it needs to do to be on the right side and to correct it. And I think that examination cannot be an episode in a fleeting moment.
We want to be intentional to let people know that we stand for equity and justice here in Los Angeles with our city leaders. And what I tell our staff on a regular basis, and I make sure that I share this with the community, is our motto: to keep the faith and keep the fight.